Welcome back to the Mythic Dungeon International, and the stakes are quite high for three of the teams competing today, trying to wrap up that final BlizzCon spot. One of them is in this next matchup. It's going to be Paint for Femme versus the Meme Team. Hello everyone, I'm Jack, and joining me for the next matchup, we've got Sloot, Nagura, and Zyronic. And Paint for Femme's got a long road ahead of them if they want to be able to make this one Zyronic. It's going to be reliant on the performances not only of the previous series with No Girls Allowed, but also for 40K, which will be the matchup after this one. It's a lot of looking at how everybody else is going to be performing and how Paint for Femme can start making a break and getting deeper into this cup.
Yeah, for BlizzCon right now, Paint for Femme is in pretty much dire straits right now. They need two things to happen. Number one, they have to win the whole thing. And number two, 40K has to finish in last place. Both of those things have to happen for them to make it to BlizzCon. And they can get a good start right now against a Meme Team. 2 series in a row we get a Meme Team, so let's keep an eye on this. But yeah, Paint for Femme has looked like really good coming into this match. They actually had an interview on Raider.io earlier this week, and they're talking about, you know, looking at the next tournament, I feel like we can win this thing.
Yeah, and they've certainly put in the work, put in the time. But that's not enough for Twitch chat, as 76% voting for the Meme Team. Let's see how they perform in Siege of Morales.
I mean, the thing is, it's just heritage at this point with Twitch chat. You gotta love those May-Mays in chat, and they just can't help themselves. But we haven't too much seen this team perform. There are some familiar faces here, though, Nagura. Of course, we do know Harudra in the tank role here, so certainly a former competitor coming in. Now, I mean, Meme Team is here to kind of hopefully blow us away. We know what Paint for Femme can do. We know how hard they're going, and right out the get-go, both teams with mirror comp back to normal world, I would say, after watching Method EU successfully run some off-meta stuff in the previous dungeon. Paint for Femme and Meme Team both heading in the downstairs area and both running Horde as well.
Yeah, so Siege is the only dungeon where Alliance and Horde actually do get different starts, and they also have different mobs throughout the dungeon. So there's a difference in difficulty and a difference in routes. We've seen different factions come out in the past. We've seen some teams, especially in the spring final in Australia, we've seen most of the teams actually still run Alliance because of that Shadowmeld coming in. But now most of the teams stick to Horde. Now we actually see one death coming for a Meme Team. We see the Monk actually going down, but they're out of combat, so they can just use that mass res from the residue to get them back up. Now, Paint for Femme, on the other hand, they skipped a lot of trash at the very start, which is very common. It seems like they're doing a really substantial pull with the Bloodlust as well. I think they also pulled trash packs from inside the boss room on top of this trash that they're pulling right here.
Certainly very aggressive as shield wall comes up for Harudra right now on the side of Meme Team. Finally, they get their Bloodlust rolling after that small hiccup with the death from Heat Monk. Paint for Femme largely finished with this pull right now, as we can already see the Emissary of Tides teleporting away. We, of course, are in actually a void-heavy dungeon in this version of Siege of Morales. Final 2 mobs are killed off with Teeming Quaking, present here as they rush off to the boss. And you're absolutely right, Nagura. They just crowd-controlled one of the Vanguards on the side and pulled it into the boss. They just have to be careful with that frontal that was Typhoon there on the side, but Miwu making sure that it doesn't clip any of the team, because not only does it do a devastating amount of damage, but it does stun you for 5 seconds. Sergeant Bainbridge here now pulled for Paint for Femme down to just the early 90s%, so still in the honeymoon phase of the boss, if you will, as he gets kited into that first bomb.
Yeah, so very impressive pull, really well executed by Paint for Femme as they finished off 3 or 4 packs even that they pulled on top here. We saw the Rogues probably tricksing the inner trash packs, the 2 that we saw where the Vanguard was to seed on top of Femme. So lots of execution that needs to go right there. And we also saw 2 Emissary of Tides on top of that pull. So well done by them to be able to finish this pull off. Now they are fighting the boss. And of course, Miwu being the only range, he's the one who needs to kite the boss every single time as the Iron Fixate, the Iron Gaze does come out. Yeah, he didn't get the bomb, actually. That was a very close call. The bomb did explode. The boss was just too slow. Unfortunately, he can't speed up that boss. He's just walking very slowly. So the bomb did explode, and they didn't get the stun off.
Not just that, but it cost Miu his undulating tides for the next 45 seconds. Starts running away, of course, with another Iron Gaze on Bainbridge, as you mentioned. He will be getting every single one of those. Meme Team dealing with a more a safe version of the strategy. They killed off the trash before dealing with the boss entirely. There's a couple marksmen on the side. They don't do too much damage, just some of those molten slugs going out in different directions. But since we are in a tyrannical affix here, they shouldn't be doing too much damage to them, as Bainbridge for them is at 74% versus Paint for Femme, who is at 18%. One heavy slash coming in here from the Vanguard is well crowd controlled. Shockwave going off there by Femme to make sure it stops off. And this should probably be the last bomb that they need to finish this boss off.
Yeah, so Pain for Femme definitely going to be the team to finish the boss off first. Meme team still working on now. Herudra is actually, we've known Herudra from the past. He used to be a DPS, a damage dealer for Shell's Angels, or Excel's Angels as they renamed later on, that won the whole series last year around. So he's the reigning champion basically from last year on Herudra's on a DPS role. Now he switched to tank role because he was playing Arms Warrior, which was pretty good the last time around. Now we don't really see any of those DPS warriors anymore, so he's decided, you know what, we're just gonna switch to the other spec that is really good currently, and now he's playing that prot warrior role. So we'll see how Herudra does in this whole cup here.
Yeah, certainly DPS warriors have gone the way of the dinosaur. Pain for Femme here has finished off with that first boss. It's pulled the commander along with the emissary of the tides on the side, killing off those marauders before they get too many debuffs on the tank. Wave Shaper about to go down, can't be interrupted, of course, while the emissary of tides is present in the group. Team doing well here to spread out for that final quaking as they get ready to head off to their first spotter. You can see it marked with the blue square there in the distance. Already up there is Femme, who dropped a shockwave on those snipers, making sure that they get clipped down with the initial artillery strike. Now, what I like to see about this is Femme actually ran ahead by himself to make sure that the spotter was out of aggro range of anybody else in the group there. Therefore, he controlled the artillery strike, allowing it to just strike all of the snipers nearby. So he had full control of the situation. The team later engaged after the 4 artillery strikes went down. So well done by them. We saw that in previous weeks as well. Just some of that early tank aggro and tank control. Meme team here, following suit right now, has killed off the first boss and are dealing with the Wave Shaper on the side as well. Heavy damage from the Marauders, but no commander pull on top of it just yet.
Yeah, Pain for Femme struggling a little bit with the pull. They unfortunately had Miwu proc the staff as well, which is something we've seen teams use later on, especially in the last boss, to deal with some of those gripping tentacles. So it's going to be a long cooldown on that one, unfortunately. Pain for Femme, though, did have a lot of single target damage on the spotter. That's something we've seen lots of teams waste time on, because the spotter that they just had, they need to finish it off to be able to skip past here. And lots of teams didn't really focus target the spotter enough, and once the trash was down, that was killed with the artillery strike, they did have to waste a lot of time to finish off the spotter too. But Pain for Femme dealing very well with that, and now they actually engaged Dread Captain Lockwood already, and we'll see how many intermission phases they will get. It's really important to skip that last one, that the third one, that some teams are not able to skip because they're just missing the single target damage.
Yeah, it is a huge time dump on that boss to be able to skip, or to have that phase even happen in the first place. It's completely set timings when the boss reaches the 100 energy at the bottom of the screen. Of course, she's off screen right now doing her transition phase, but there's no way you can stop that other than by killing her. Even if she goes down, even if you have a couple of damage over time effects on her, she jumps up, she'll just stay at 1 health on the boat before coming down. So really important to try and finish that off, especially in this tyrannical environment. Cozy not having his cheat death available, taking a ton of damage and actually going down here for Meme Team right now. There's a lot of damage coming in, I believe, from the powder shots as well, as they punt the enchanted emissary down the side and are trying to finish off this last Wave Shaper. But actually, he might have cleaved himself on the enchanted emissary. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but he certainly took huge chunks of damage and won't have the they opted not to use the battle res as they killed the first boss off, so checkpoint is there for them.
Yeah, and they actually did not, so they did commit the battle res, but he didn't take it. He canceled it and it just released to come back, so they still have the battle res for them. He just figured that the mobs are dead almost, so he doesn't want to just use the battle res here. So just saving some time while Pain for Femme still dealing with Dread Captain Lockwood. 47% with the second intermission phase. It's going to be very hard to be able to finish off 46% before the third intermission phase comes out. And this is why we've seen some teams actually save the Bloodlust for this very boss just to skip this last intermission phase. And I don't think they'll be able to do it unless they have some 5 buffs.
There is absolutely no way they're going to be able to do it. No, I just don't think it's possible at this level of DPS. And I mean, even with 5 buffs all the way through, we'll see what they can pull off when they come down. But they don't have Bloodlust available. They don't have most cooldowns available from what I've seen. We just saw Adrenaline Rush go up right now from Shelley on their team. So Dread Captain Lockwood back down. We'll see if they can pull it off. Marauders are pulled on top of the boss right now. Femme gets clipped by one of the artillery strikes as he charges back in, and now he's debuffed with that strike from the Marauders, doing a pretty substantial amount of damage, but also taking increasing your damage taken by, I believe, 15% per stack. We'll have to double check on that, but it does take your damage up. Meme Team here taking just a bit of splash damage. They've as well pulled aggressively on top of the boss, along with the Marauders this time. So something that most teams save for later. The Marauders, as you saw Pain for Femme do, but Dread Captain Lockwood going up at 2%. This is what you hate to see. So much time lost here. I told you they wouldn't do it.
Yeah, it was very clear that they wouldn't make it. It was far off. That's actually just 2%, but still.
What can I say? I can see into the future.
But yeah, as you mentioned, just a huge time sink here for Pain for Femme to get this last intermission phase. Not completely sure if they might want to like change up their strategy a little bit to have the Bloodlust here, but then again, this very first pull that they did to get the 14% trash, it probably did require the Bloodlust, just because there's so many trash packs that are being pulled on top, and you also have the Emissaries of Tides, so insane difficulty there. So they probably just can't afford to save the Bloodlust. Either way, they did down Lockwood now. We're probably going to see lots of spotter shenanigans happen here. There's one of those emissaries that needs to be dealt with that you can see Fem just pull. They actually did not. Oh yeah, they did get a stab up, so the emissary is not inside the side. Oh no, it is in. Yeah, the Emissary of Tides is on top of this wall.
It's in. It's just having a good time right now. Now, important to note that teaming usually means there's more trash present throughout the dungeon, and some dungeons even have packs in them that did not usually exist in their non-teaming versions. In this dungeon specifically, there's a 2-commander patrol that we see on top of everything. Now, the commanders are elite or lieutenant-style mobs. They can't be crowd-controlled, and they give that bolstering shout, which buffs all of their allies nearby for 70% damage reduction. So that's why it's important. You see a lot of the Arcane Torrents have been used here for Pain for Femme to try and dispel all of the surrounding mobs to kill everything quickly. Femme needing to get out of dodge there. A lot of damage coming in on him, with not only the Demolisher in there, but 2 commanders as well charging in various directions. It looked like they stabilized now, but that was quite dangerous at the start.
Yeah, and we also see Miu actually not running that Master Root. We've seen most of the rest of the druids just run the Master Root just to have some extra root, not only for their spotter to just constantly keep him rooted so he doesn't do anything else, but also for emissaries and to just keep everything on top of each other for the artillery strike. So Miu not choosing to use that talent, just using the Typhoon instead. We'll see what they do with it later on. As they finish off this pack, or they're close to finishing it off, they probably want to drag this spotter further into the dungeon and do a double spotter strategy. At least that's what we've seen a lot from the western region. They just keep the spotter from the that is in front of Lockwood, that is rooted here in the back. Miu just constantly casting the entangling roots on him, and then later on they're gonna pick up the second spotter and then do some significant pulls where they pull the boss and make sure the whole room from the next boss is just gonna get pulled on top, and then they just have the huge AoE CC come out, and then the double spotter just doing so much friendly damage to those mobs, being able to finish the trash mobs off so fast.
Dread Captain Lockwood here in a race against time for Meme Team, trying to get her down before she fills that energy bar. It looks like they're going to be able to, so I'm not sure which rotation that was for them, if they actually managed to skip the phase. That Pain for Femme fell short on it, 2%. I'm not sure if they had that extra phase or not, but nonetheless, it looks like they'll be able to. No, oh no, she's about to go up at 1%. I spoke too soon, but I knew it was going to happen from the start. Dread Captain Lockwood heartbreakingly goes up at 1%. I thought they were going to do it because she was only at 36% when she came down versus 46% for Pain for Femme, so no time gain for a team that is quite desperately behind, not only just in raw progression through the dungeon, but 2 deaths on the board as well. That's an extra 10 seconds that they'll need to overcome their opponents by. Pain for Femme chewing through the town here for in the Siege of Borealis dungeon as they get ready to move up to the spotter that resides up the stairs soon. Because of the teaming environment, they're pulling a lot of trash and trash packs that you typically don't see teams pull in its non-teaming version. But even with the extra trash present, you just need so much extra in this dungeon. Spotter Parade coming down on top of the Buccaneers that were pulled on the side. Now, the Spotter's fire, artillery fire, does not affect the Demolishers, that kind of big Etten on the side, nor does it affect the Commanders. So these are some of those Lieutenant mobs that I mentioned earlier that we're going to have to pay attention to coming up in Hadal's room.
Yeah, it really seems like this Demolisher for Pain for Femme is alive forever. They've been fighting this Demolisher for so long, but they're still playing it very efficiently. They need the Demolisher for the percentage, as you mentioned, because of teaming, but because it has so much HP and because it's not getting affected by artillery, they just constantly dragged it through the room and would just constantly pull more trash on top of it, even though they don't get out of combat, but they wouldn't get out of combat anyway because of the spotter, right? So it's not going to hurt them at all to just constantly chain pull on top of any sort of Lieutenant-style mobs, as you mentioned, and therefore not losing too much efficiency. Now, they gotta be careful with the Void Emissary because you can see the debuff on the group frames. They did go in combat with the Void Emissary, and they were too close. That's why Femme just pulled the mobs back to not get affected by that AoE anymore.
Double Commander pack, the teaming Double Commander pack being pulled here for Meme Team that has now finished off Dread Captain Lockwood. Of course, she just reminder, she unfortunately went up at that 1%, so they just had to essentially sneeze on her and she fell over after, but they did have to incur all the time spent during the transition. Zeroni is taking just a bit of damage there, doesn't have his cheat death available, dropped below 20%, almost getting down, but Meme Team holding their ground here and dropping the spotter. The problem is that spotter fire, as I mentioned, will not kill the commanders. So the team doing well to cleave off of those commanders and try to just drop them as quickly as possible. As I said, at 47% trash versus 73% for Paint for Femme, who has now moved into the Hadali, or the hallway of Hadal, as we mentioned last week in the East weekend for whoever is watching here. Now, most teams usually do a pretty substantial pull here, but it might just get a bit too out of hand, especially with teaming Nagur if you pull the entire Hadal run.
Yeah, and this pull that they're doing right now is also very dangerous. They have to be very careful here as they pulled all the snipers on top. Now, we see risky strategies and safe strategies, and Paint for Femme definitely running with the risky one, as they don't have the snipers to seed. They just constantly cast and shoot on random targets, doing insane amounts of damage. But they finished it off properly, didn't have any deaths so far. 100% clean run, 0 deaths by Paint for Femme. They're holding on to the Bloodlust for a really long time at this point, but I assume they're going to use it for this next boss when they pull some of those commanders that are immune to the artillery strike on top of it, which is what most teams are doing so far. So we are probably going to see that come out later. But yeah, you still see both of those spotters, and we will see if they pull the boss. And it seemed like they are.
No, I don't think they did. I saw Distract go up on Hadal on the side just to make sure that it was kept there. So it looks like they're doing a bit more modest of a pull. So they're dealing with one of the commander packs on the side, and then afterwards I expect that they're going to do the entirety of the room, or at least the remainder of the room here. Commander being cleaved down and focused by Paint for Femme. Now, what we've seen some teams do as well is clear all of the trash except for the Emissary of Tides and the commander in there, and then pull them on top of Hadal aggressively and just cleave it down, because really it's just a bunch of tank damage that comes in. So as long as it's stable, there's no stacking deadly poison at that point either from the invaders. They should be able to handle it. Meme team moving up through the town right now, as well as they pull one more Demolisher, and likely are going to combine it with some of the trash up ahead. Only one Buccaneer, pretty modest pull and shot from them, and they have to shift gears here to try and catch up to their team, especially because Heat Monka had fallen yet again, adding another death onto the board, making it 3 for the team, sitting at 15 seconds of extra time that they need to complete the dungeon by. Next version of the pull coming in here for Paint for Femme. It looks like they're actually just pulling pull by pull. I haven't seen Hadal himself pull it, so I guess they're just waiting to combine something with the boss, or just taking it slow because they know they're ahead.
Yeah, either way, I think one of their spotters went down. I saw it there in the corner being rooted, but it was super low HP. I believe it was only in 1%, so they were struggling so much to keep it alive. Haruda actually going down for Meme Team on one of their trash pulls, so immediately releasing. They did have a Battle Rush available, but Haruda chose to just immediately release. So this might cause some problems for them to finish it off. So they were actually trying to deal with the Void-touched Emissary that we see being very low HP, and they didn't manage to finish it off in time, and that's probably why Haruda went down. Either way, that's something most of the teams we've seen in the past just completely skip that Emissary, because it's such a pain to deal with on top of having to deal with everything else in this area. So Meme Team choosing to pull it and just it not paying off. Well, Paint for Femme, they're already on 98% trash. It seems like they're actually gonna go over 100%. It seems like they're miscalculated a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, well, knowing Shell and Femme on the team, it's hard for them to add up all the totals, but they're certainly going to go over here. I mean, there's what, 2 snipers present still, and an invader that's well over the 2%, and a spotter available, so that's well over the amount of trash they need. Hadal being pulled out here one more time, resetting the boss just to have the clean slate as they run back with the invader right now. Femme just getting the spotter to move into range, as well as one of the arcane damage coming in from the Ashara items from the Eternal Palace. We do know they pulse on a 2-minute timer, comes in and finishes off the sniper, and not only the sniper but the spotter on the side as well. Move into the room and get ready to pull. Hadal here has certainly overpulled their trash, which leads me to believe really that they must have accidentally pulled an extra pack somewhere along the way through the town that they didn't intend to, and they just kind of reacted to it and finished it off. Void-touched Emissary, we do know, do not heal when dropped combat with, or if the team wipes, whatever it may be, so they just come in and sneeze on it for a Meme Team, that is, finish off that Void Emissary that had earlier wiped them, and are now dealing with the spotter with the 4 snipers.
So Paint for Femme not choosing to pull the boss on top of the commanders, as we mentioned earlier, which is something we've seen before, and also not using the Bloodlust. They did play it safe, finish off all of the mobs, got out of combat, being able to reset, being able to get a drink off on the healer, and using all of those potions as well to get an out of combat timer on those as well. So Paint for Femme playing it a little bit safer. It could be because they know they're far ahead at this point, or because they practice it this way. Either way, if they play against another team where it might be a little bit closer, maybe they do decide to just pull the boss on top of this commanders at the very end and on top of the spotter. But Paint for Femme, they are 100% trash. They have to deal with Hadal and the last boss. They have they're not committing the Bloodlust, so I assume they are going to use it for the last boss.
Yeah, probably on that last platform to burn down the gripping terror in the back and ignore that high health demolishing. We'll have to see what they do with that, as Hadal about to hit his next round of 100 energy, where we know the crashing wave will come in. Meme team still chewing through. They actually dealt quite well with the sniper pack, the quad sniper pack with the spotter in front of it, but it just slowly, I mean, you just mentioned earlier, Nagura, you know, there's risky plays and there's safe plays, and Pain for Femme has done nothing but risky plays up until they got to Hadal's room, something that Meme team has not replicated, or at least not well replicated in some areas, dealing with that Void Emissary. They're at 86% trash, and I'm pretty sure that the trash, even on teaming, the trash remaining plus the spotter that they have in Hadal's room is going to put them over 100 as well, so well over 100. So Pain for Femme here at 35% on Hadal as they move around the backside and dodge that explosion.
Yeah, so Pain for Femme, this is really what we like to see from them. We've talked about this team a lot. We said that they always have the good strategies, they have the time in theory, but they always failed on executing them properly. And they had those huge team wipes where they would show us those huge pulls. Some of them would work, and then the other huge pulls wouldn't work, and it was just too risky, and they didn't execute us properly. But this time around, in Siege, they're actually showing up, having 0 deaths, 100% clean run so far by Pain for Femme. So if they continue this kind of play that we really want to see for them, there might still be a chance, right? There might be a chance to win the whole tournament. They ended up having the 2nd seed in the time trials, so they showed some insane times in the time trials as well, and they're the team that really wants to show up. Even if the chance is very slim for them to still qualify for BlizzCon, they really want to win, and they really want to just get there. So it's really a pride thing as well. I've talked to some of them, and they said they just, you know, they can do it, but they're just not showing up for the cut play, and it really hurts that they just want to show that they are a good team, and they want to show they can hang with the best, really.
Yeah, I mean, they said they can do it, but yeah, they just don't feel like it. Whenever they lose, it's just because they feel like doing it again next week. No, I'm just kidding. No, certainly very dedicated. I mean, I rated with Shella. I know just how dedicated he is to this MDI. Unfortunately, a bit more disaster here for Meme Team, which seems to only be a dream right now, going down on a full team wipe yet again to the mass pull of Hadal Trash. So they kind of tried a Hail Mary and did a very aggressive pull. They're doing it again right now. They pulled all of the boss's rooms, something that we saw Pain for Femme do in multiple parts, whether it be for safety or as just what their strat kind of relies around. But Pain for Femme now has popped Bloodlust on the very first portion of Vikoth, the final boss here of the dungeon, which we usually don't see when you have Bloodlust available on this boss, Nagura.
Yeah, usually they are saving it for the last platform. Either way, they are popping it for first, just to finish off this gripping terror before a 3rd demolishing terror spawns. They got 2, so thankfully they did get them very close to one another. The demolishers can spawn in random areas, or in a couple of different ones, and they were lucky to get the close one, so Femme is actually able to tank both of them. You don't need a rogue to go there and off-tank one of the tentacles, so good on them, winning the RNG lottery. And you can see Miwu, the healer, actually staying back and using that cannon as they go to the 2nd platform. Now, the 2nd platform, they cannot focus the gripping terror. They definitely have to deal with some of the demolishing ones, just because they don't have this Bloodlust available anymore. They don't have the cooldowns anymore, so they will have to go in the demolishing first.
Meme Team, more and more disaster every time. I feel like I'm the bearer of bad. I feel like I'm the bad cop here every time I talk. It's trouble for Meme Team, but 19 deaths right now. They had almost actually finished all of the trash off for Hadal's room, but it's just at the end, Haruder slipped and died, and then, you know, everything kind of followed suit. Cozy fell over because he had the most aggro. The battle res went up from Chiz, but it just wasn't enough because he had all of the aggro on the remaining commanders. So that almost full wiped the team. They were trying to salvage the rest of the pool now by releasing and running back. I'm not sure if they're going to be able to do it, but once again, huge time loss there. 19 deaths on the board. That's 95 extra seconds that they have to overcome this dungeon by. Meaning Pain for Femme will have to, I mean, just wipe several times on this boss, which is not going to happen as they kill the 2nd gripping right now, and they're finishing off the demolishing safely before getting over to the cannon that the Kultiran is working on fixing.
They actually did have a lot of damage on this gripping terror. I think they only got 2 demolishing, which is actually really good for the 2nd platform without having a lot of cooldowns available to them. So well done by them. Lots of damage coming out of that team. Now Miwu still has the staff available, which is probably something he wants to use for the very last platform to deal with this gripping, and maybe that's why they also committed the Bloodlust for the first, because they knew they can have the staff available. But it's a little bit inconsistent on the last platform if you want to do it with your HP, if you want to proc the staff with your HP. Femme just now getting to the last platform, being sure that he that he does tank the demolishing, but obviously the whole team and not going into demolishing one, just going into gripping, but it's dropping pretty slowly actually.
Yeah, it's dropping slowly, and there's a bit of danger there. Fem went for a little swim. He was bobbing up and down in the water to make sure that he didn't get grabbed one of the grasping tentacles, which we've actually seen for the first time ever in previous weeks here at the MDI. But on top of it, he saw the damage over time effect that the boss puts out on 2 random players, so quite a struggle to heal, but Mew finally catching up on that, and Fem is now safe again as he still jumps up and down in the water. There you can see the Shark Tooth debuff showing up occasionally, but that won't matter soon as the Kultiran fixes the final cannon and they take a shot onto Vikoth and finish up the dungeon, Mew proccing his staff at the end, and take a very commanding lead in this series.
Yeah, Pain for Fem doing an excellent job in Siege Borealis to take the game number 1 against the meme team. And we've seen Borealis a number of different times here, is ironic. And our pressure point, our focus is always going to be that Hadal room, how people are setting it up, whether or not they're going for these hyper-aggressive double spotter type of pulls. And Pain for Fem played it safe, but they did it very well.
I mean, we've talked so much about Siege Borealis when we cast this dungeon. I mean, you can kind of narrow down to 2 words, just spotter things. How will you deal with a spotter? How will you use those sided artilleries to clear the trash in the dungeon? In Pain for Fem, even though they opted for smaller pulls with the spotter, they just were a lot cleaner in their stacking and their CC and their stuns. They were just very good at making sure they dealt with the sided artilleries perfectly throughout the entire dungeon. And on top of that, they didn't really have any hiccups either. Meme team just kind of had really small mistakes, random deaths all over the place. And on top of that, this really unfortunate occurrence on Dread Captain Lockwood, where the boss poured it up at 1% HP. That's just an extra 40 seconds on the board. It's really not what you want to see from a team whenever you're in the MDI. You gotta have your DPS kind of fine-tuned to not have that kind of thing happen. Other than that, Pain for Fem, they were incredibly clean. I believe no deaths the entire dungeon, just a super clean run from them. And, you know, maybe they could go faster against a better team later on. They might have something in their back pocket, but their Hadal pulls, I mean, they did really well in general.
Yeah, and right there, that's what they needed to make sure they were getting done. And as we were talking about Pain for Fem preparing for this tournament, knowing that they need to go and win the whole thing, really, to be able to make sure that they're going to be able to go to BlizzCon, and start showing how well they're practicing and how well they're preparing for some of these matchups. Because next one we have up is going to be Waycrest Manor, Slew.
Yeah, and, you know, I was talking to Nagur earlier as we were looking through the, you know, recapping the list of all the dungeons and the affixes. And I was like, yeah, you know, these don't look too bad. And then we both got to Waycrest and we're like, oh, yeah, that's not very...
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to have bursting and explosive in this dungeon. So with the amount of trash density, it's going to be nasty. And we know the teams like to be really aggressive. For instance, in the courtyard, you know, pulling everything together. And that bursting is just going to get out of hand. You miss an explosive here and there. It's going to be pretty rough.
And routing is always going to be that big factor we were talking about. I mean, we talked previously, it's ironic, about how Taldazar was changing up its routing for bolstering, but let's take a look at the MDT for Siege Borealis with some of those Hadal pulls and spotter pulls.
Yeah, the biggest thing in Siege Borealis, we keep going back to these spotter pulls, and the way teams have been pulling this dungeon lately is they'll keep this particular spotter alive for pretty much the entire second half of the dungeon after you kill Dread Captain Lockwood, and you'll use that spotter to pretty much clear everything in this square. And we've seen a recent change from a lot of teams about 2 weeks ago, where teams would keep this spotter alive, and their tank would run all the way through this entire section of the dungeon, and they'd bring a piece around in this alley right here, and they'd keep both of these spotters alive, and they'd pull literally all of this trash through. Now, we saw actually a change from Pain for Fem, where instead of going for this massive pull, they actually stopped and killed these 2 trash packs with just the 1 spotter, just so they could keep 2 spotters alive when they get to this Hadal alley like we were talking last week. And this is just a super safe way of doing the dungeon. Once we roll a clip, you can see they were just super safe. They did a smaller pull with a double spotter, and because they pulled less, they were able to keep it better stacked and deal with it more efficiently, so they had both of their spotters alive for when they eventually went on to kill off of Hadal's room.
And that was one of the interesting things, is when you have these massive pulls, keeping everything tightly packed in together has been a major issue, a major factor for a lot of people. We saw the Vengeance Demon Hunter coming out to great effect, and it looked amazing because, oh, you just put everything in Sigil of Misery and then you're able to keep it all stacked up together, but then nobody's able to deal any kind of damage to it. So, as you mentioned, that those smaller pulls, making sure they're going to be a lot more efficient, was absolutely critical to that. We'll be looking at how they're going to be pulling in Waycrest Manor, but we're taking a quick break before we do. Don't go anywhere, guys. The MDI will be back right after this break. Pain for Fem is up 1 against Meme Team as we're going now into game number 2, being Waycrest Manor. We've got Fortified, Bursting, Explosive, and our favorite, the Void Emissary.
the favorite of them all. Nice view overall there, Jack. Woo! Going into this dungeon. I mean, this I would say is probably the nastiest dungeon that the teams have to deal with this week, Hero.
Yeah, they definitely complain about this dungeon specifically a lot. We actually see some comp changes actually. We see Mistweaver come out of Pain for Femme, which is something we've seen quite a lot in Wakecrest specifically. And we see the Demon Hunter from the meme team, which is also something we've seen specifically with bursting in Wakecrest mana, just because of the darkness, being able to just still do those huge pulls and have darkness, just hope for the best, hope for the RNG, and blast the RNG. But meme team going straight to the first boss, popping that Bloodlust, pulling some trash on top as well, which is pretty dangerous because there is a 50% healing reduction aura on this very first boss, on the very first sister that does have the Aris.
Yeah, most teams we actually wait to see. They usually put it on Milady or Briar on top. They put the trash on top of those two just because of that healing reduction aura, but it seems it didn't phase them. Just a bit of chunk damage at the start for Herder, but they managed to just power through that right now as Pain for Femme has dealt with the first trash pull in the dungeon, consisting of that Void Emissaries and the 7 Soul Essences, and has now engaged the Triad as well. Meme team sitting at 2% trash versus Fem's 5%. Now, that's all, you know, pennies and nickels here. We have still a lot of extra trash to be dealt with in the dungeon, but it starts to really shape up some of the pulls that you can do later, especially with how aggressive they may or may not be in the courtyard and in Rawl's room. Now, we know Pain for Femme specifically, I don't know if you remember, they tried to do a very aggressive full room Rawl pull last week with the Necrotic bursting and failed because Fem's Stone form, excuse me, was not available. So something that they don't have to deal with this time. So they might try to do it again once we get to that room, as Meme Team now is dealing with the second round of Sisters, trying to finish off Selena. She did get one of the mind controls off, but they finally broke him free and they're looking to finish her off.
Yeah, so one thing to note is Pain for Femme actually holding on to the Bloodlust. We've seen most teams just commit the Bloodlust here on the very first Triad boss just to get in a cooldown, but Pain for Femme holding on. Now, it is a fortified setting. We had Tyrannical in the past, so we changed it up from the second Western Cup to the third one. So this time around, the boss is not too much HP and not as difficult as the last time around, but the trash is going to be more difficult, and therefore I assume Pain for Femme is holding on to the Bloodlust just to do some bigger trash pulls and have the safety of the Bloodlust, not only for the damage dealers, but also for the healers. Bloodlust really does matter for the extra HPS that can come out of the Mistweaver. Now, Meme Team is about to finish off the boss here. They also did pull it earlier, did commit the Bloodlust, that's why they are finishing off before Pain for Femme. They also have, they're 4% trash, actually 6% trash, as they pulled the Acolytes on top, but they didn't deal with the first trash pack that is at the start of the dungeon, which Pain for Femme did deal with.
Meme Team here, that was a bit of a close call there while you were talking on the second round of Sister Malady, just because everyone dipped so low. They actually almost had a disastrous situation. It was hard for Chiz to move just because he was trying to get heals off and committed his Tranquility there, but no harm done. Speaking of harm done, Heat Potato going down yet again. Man, he had a lot of struggles on his Windwalker as well in the previous dungeon, but he got chunked down to 10% right before the Void Emissary got her first pulse off, so unlucky timing there for him. He goes down. They don't commit the battle rest to it just because, of course, he can't spawn at the beginning of the dungeon. That door is open for them in the lower left, so he just runs right back in and fell rushes into action. This pull is actually very scary for the team. This is a ton of tank damage that goes out, so a lot of pressure here for Harudra. We'll see what Pain for Femme does. They actually end up skipping that hallway. They know how dangerous it is, and they still do a very typical pull consisting just a massive amount of enemies here. Explosives going off. We're going to have to be careful with the bursting as well. We don't have too many ways to immune it. Now, of course, the Rogues and the DK can, but Mew and Femme are going to have to eat a lot of those stacks to the face.
Yeah, so they were saving the Bloodlust for this specific pull here. As they pulled so many mobs on top of each other, you can see the bursting stacks on everybody. Mew just having to deal with that. But Mistweaver actually having a lot of burst healing and a lot of those cooldowns that can deal with those bursting stacks really well. So you can see most of the team actually really healthy still. And of course, most of the defensives have been committed as well. You see both of the cloaks being used by the Rogues, and you also see the defensives come out of the DK as well, with the AMS also being really nice for bursting too. Now, they did finish off this pack. Now we're gonna see Shelle pull this pack to the side, and then he's gonna tricks the boss to Femme Clap, and then it's gonna deal with Goliath by itself. This is something we've seen multiple times in the past as well.
Yeah, so Mew does the one to pull the boss. Indeed, he transcends back after getting a Crackling Jade Lightning onto Soulbound Goliath. So they pull it right into the middle area here, and they actually end up combining it with some of the trash. So the Thorn Shapers plus the one Thorn Guard are are on top of the boss, but they don't want anything to do with Matron Brindle. She is a lieutenant-style mob, has a ton of health in this, especially in this fortified environment. It does quite a lot of damage to the tank, so they're just avoiding that one at all costs right now as they cleave the other 3 down. And I would expect, especially in a fortified environment, that they're going to pull some more trash on top of this boss towards the end. We see a lot of teams commit with maybe some of the guards on the side as well. Meme team, 20% trash, so they're tied with trash for Pain for Femme, but certainly haven't even dealt with the courtyard here, as they're only now dealing with the first pull consisting of that void-touched emissary. So it's it's still actually pretty close between the 2 teams, but one big pull will get Pain for Femme caught right back up with trash, especially if that room goes down again.
Yeah, and an advantage here with Pain for Femme as well, because they do have the Mist Weaver, they have the Monk, who can dispel those infected thorns from the Thorn Shapers, which just do an insane amount of damage if lots of them go off. And Meme Team, on the other hand, does not have a Monk in their group, so there's no way they can actually get rid of that disease at all, because Restitutes cannot dispel those. So advantage there for Pain for Femme in case you do get unlucky, have multiple thorns on one player. It does do a lot of damage, as you can see right now on the Restitute for Meme Team. But Pain for Femme, they are still dealing with Soulbound Goliath. They finished off the trash at this point, so they're probably really safe to finish off the rest of the fight. Not much else you have to deal with here. You see Miwu actually using a mana potion here. That's one problem that Mist Weavers have in general, is mana. Restitute never really goes or at least not if you don't use your dots a lot. If you don't do a lot of damage with your dots, then you usually don't run out of mana. But Mist Weaver definitely struggling sometimes. So we see actually a channeled potion coming out of Miwu just to be on the safer side and not go completely out of mana here.
So they have to be careful here. Tranquility finally popped for Meme Team right now, but I was just eyeing those Thorn Shapers, and a lot of them got the Soul Fetish cast off, which ended up buffing a couple of the Thorn Guards, but luckily they let no effigy reconstruction go off, so they managed to kill everything off. And yeah, just as we assumed earlier, a bit of trash coming on top of the boss here for Soulbound Goliath on the side of Pain for Femme on the left side of the screen. Just trying to get as efficient cleave as they can. Soulbound Goliath, not exactly the most mechanically complex boss in the world, and doesn't pose too many dangers as long as you have a nice balance of tank damage and then just the casual reset, making sure that the healer knows when that's coming so they're prepared for the pulsing AoE damage. So they managed to group up everything on top of the boss and easily cleave it down. They just want to make sure that they don't get clipped by the Void Emissary that is hiding on the other side of the door leading into the Raw hallway.
Yeah, so they actually struggle a little bit here on Ricky. He drops really low as the Thorns do get applied from the boss to him. But Goliath at this point on 10%. The trash almost done. Still just some maggots left here that they have to deal with. Fem actually dropping really low as well. But this is, now I understand why he did use the mana potion, because they were planning on pulling all of this trash on top. Because he seemed to have like decent amount of mana for Goliath. But if you're planning on doing those kind of trash pulls on top, then you want to make sure that you have enough mana for that. So they did pull some of those guards, which do a lot of tank damage, and they pulled some of the kitchen area as well. So good on them to be able to pull this off. As the Meme Team, on the other hand, did pull Mythic Brindle, which we've talked about. None of those teams really want to deal with this anymore, but the Meme Team just not wanting to just skip it, and they just straight ahead deal with the mini boss, and now they engage Soulbound Goliath. Yeah,
certainly not much finesse to their pathing. They're kind of just bulldozing through everything right now. Haven't really skipped too much. They've dealt with the guard in the captain hallway. They've dealt with pretty much the entirety of the courtyard here, sitting at 39% trash versus Fem's 31%. So it'll give excuse me, it'll give them the luxury to later skip some of the trash leading. Well, there's lots of options they can skip, so we'll have to see exactly what they want to skip, as Pain for Femme is dealing with part of the Raw hallway here still. They're still in the doorway of Raw's room. Now, this is not the one that's open. I believe the one all the way around is. However, keep in mind, there's an enchanted emissary. You could already see its aura on the side. That enchanted emissary needs to be babysat by somebody. We saw it be actually disastrous for Method EU 2 weeks ago. Ended up wiping up the entire team when they pulled it because, well, all of the DPS brains killed themselves on the Reflect and nobody was taking care of it. So hopefully they can handle that should they decide to pull the entirety of Raw's room.
Yes, if I'm doing a decent pull here, not too much, but there's a lot of maggots, and it's a fortified setting, making this dungeon just so dangerous. Now, one thing to note is that those maggots do not actually apply bursting. They changed it over the course of the expansion and actually made them not apply on death affixes. So they won't bolster, they won't proc sanguine or anything like that, and they also won't proc bursting. So making it a little bit easier on them, but there's still just so many trash mobs here. There's so many mobs that don't have insane amounts of HP, so bursting, making this dungeon so much more difficult, especially if you have fortified, and just in general, Waycrest at just so much dangerous trash in here. And that's why you can see everyone dropping so low because of those random debuffs coming out. You see the Gorgers jumping around, leaving bleeds behind. You see the Maggots just constantly casting that spit debuff, dropping everybody so low.
Yeah, I mean, not just that, but just because of the healing intensity, it even made Mew proc his staff just a bit earlier, so he doesn't have that available for like 8 minutes or so. But pretty much the entirety rendering the dungeon at this point. His Paint for Fem is just in the low 50s of percent in the moment once they finish off the rest of this trash. Meme Team has finished off Soulbound Goliath. Now, Paint for Fem here is starting to remind me of the previous dungeon in Siege of Braus once they got to the Hadal area. They actually did pretty conservative pulls compared to some of the teams we're seeing. Part of it, I'm sure, is, as you're saying, Nagur, is just respect for the danger of this hallway and how much damage goes out. But if Meme Team can do a really huge aggressive pull in the hallway and pull it off, and they've actually kind of done one right now, well, not as aggressive, but they can still catch up to where Paint for Fem is.
Yeah, most definitely. They have both have the Unholy DK available, so they can do those huge pulls, pull it on top of Ral. Now, one difference, though, I believe the last time around that Paint for Fem was trying to do this big pull where they had this huge team wipe, I believe it was Tyrannical. So maybe this time around they don't want to try anything like that. They can still try to pull some trash on top of Goliath, but I don't think on top of Ral, sorry, but I don't think it's going to be as big as we've seen before, just because of Fortified making it so much more difficult. Because Ral on Tyrannical is really not a big deal, but this trash, that's the dangerous part of this dungeon. So when it is buffed by Fortified, you have to do a little bit more conservative pulls, and you want to make sure that you play as safe as possible, especially if you know that you're ahead. But as you mentioned, there's chances for Meme Team to come back, and they are committing their bloodlust for some of those bigger pulls, as you mentioned.
Yeah, but you know, this isn't really the biggest pull. It's still only half the hallway. It's still at a faster pace, don't get me wrong, than Paint for Fem. I think Paint for Fem did a quad part hallway here. Meme Team's doing it all in 2 pulls, so they're catching up a bit. But you know, this bloodlust, I don't certainly think it's horrible by any means, but it's you know, it's going to cost them boss damage in time later. We can already see Paint for Fem has aggressively pulled the remainder of the Raw room. Now they already cleared some of the trash out in here. Enchanted Emissary is being handled well in the corner there. We saw Shella run up to it earlier, get a bit of sap and damage on it just to make sure it got away from the group, and it's starting to creep up in the group right now. But we can see Barrow with his back turned to it, likely with Blade Flurry popped, is making sure that he keeps it out of the group passively as it tries to get it, and we do know any damage, of course, punts it back. Death Pact going up here from Ricky, who pretty much has soloed the rest of the trash that had come in and benefited a huge amount of damage on the boss, who now sits at 74% for Paint for Fem, as Meme Team is doing an equally aggressive pull, but no boss for them. So they're just clearing out the trash first, minus the Enchanted Emissary in the corner, and then going from there. Oh no, they left a poor little Maggot in the corner.
Aww. You should pull it, just so it's not, doesn't feel lonely.
Yeah, I mean,
so it's that instead. Either way.
Savage Nagura today.
Meme Team deal. Interesting to see that because now with the room being cleared, the Ral room, that means that there's not going to be any more trash that they can really pull on top of Ral, right? So not really making use of that DK single target damage. I mean, it's mainly there for the AoE damage, right? But if you pull trash on top of a high HP single target mob, then not only do you get the advantage from the DK doing a lot of AoE damage, you also get the advantage from them doing a lot of single target damage because of Vaster Might, right? So it's just a win-win situation if you do huge pulls on bosses, and that's something that you want to make use of, really, if you have the DK. So Meme Team not choosing to do so. They only have the Emissary left and only those 3 mobs. There's not really that many, so we'll see how their single target looks on this fight. While Paint for Fem, they're on 20% on Ral. Seems like it's taking them a decent amount of time here, really, because as I mentioned before, it's not a Tyrannical setting anymore as the last time around for the Western Cup 2, so it really does take them a decent amount of time to finish up Ral here.
Yeah, Raw's now at 85% for Meme Team, while Paint for Fem is just about to finish the boss off. Now, of course, you know, I was thinking, hey, maybe they could pull the Maggots in the kitchen and pull them back, but there's a Void Emissary in there, and they certainly don't want to do that. I mean, there are a couple of pixels of space where you can actually pull the Void Emissary in the kitchen and still not get clipped by her AoE, but it's just a pretty disastrous situation. There's no point risking that, as Paint for Fem has dealt with the rest of that trash, and I believe they're getting a snap pull on top of the table with all the Survivalists and the Marksmen. That's exactly what they're doing. So one of the rogues ran into the lodge area, or the living room area, if you will, and pulled most of the trash in there. Fem was already waiting on top of this tabletop. A pull that we saw popularized by Team D, if I'm not mistaken. They were one of the first to do it on broadcast, to do this snap pull on top of the table. So nice to see from them right now as they cleave down everything. Cloak of Shadow is coming up from Shella right now to clear some of those explosive traps on the ground and give the team space to move around. Really nice pull by them, 78%, and they start heading off into the kitchen area, where I likely expect that they will skip the double void in a row and then the Shadow Meld later.
Yeah, so some explosives actually went off there for Pain for Fem, but no problem. It actually is quite difficult to deal with all of the explosives there, just because if you snap a lot of mobs on one spot, then all of the nameplates are in the exact same position, and once the explosives spawn, it actually is a little bit hard to target them. But of course, those teams are very practiced in killing them, so one or two going off is not going to wipe the whole team as long as you have any sort of cooldowns available to them. Now, the Void Emissary here going down, it did dropped them very low. I believe 2 casts went off, so they did manage just fine. But now they have to deal with the Rune Weaver, and those witches that spawn throughout the dungeon, they have a lot of HP, so it's really not as efficient as some other trash packs that you can do, but they're just choosing to deal with it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not very efficient, but because I think they want to skip the Void, there's right downstairs into the basement where they're going right now, there's a Void Emissary right around the corner, so they had to kind of finish that off before skipping the rest of this. I believe some speed pots went up, and if not, they're just going to run right by, and they're going to Shadow Meld at the bottom of the stairs. You can see Fem being the first one in right now, grabs what he can, pulls it off to the side, everybody else runs downstairs, and they're going to vanish it off. They're already at 85%, so the combination of Lord and Lady Waycrest room that they've just reached right now, plus the Gloom Horrors between the 4th and 5th boss, Gorak Tool, is everything that they're going to need. Reiki going down, though, I'm not sure if he managed to get his Shadow Meld off properly. It is on early cooldown right now, so he did use it recently, but I guess it just didn't work out for him. So bit of a slip up there, but not anything too detrimental as they res him and get ready for... I'm curious to see if they're going to end up pulling this with the boss.
Yeah, so they have the Bloodlust available, so in theory they could be pulling this with the boss. It is a very dangerous pull, especially with Fortify, just have those mobs doing so much damage. It seems like they're delaying it a little bit, but I assume... There we go. So the boss is getting pulled. I assume the Bloodlust is getting used as well soon. Meme Team having some struggle with their skip, but thankfully the Residue did manage to get the Shadow Melt off, so we can see the Mass Rest come out. But those are 3 deaths on the board, so you have those 15 seconds, unfortunately, while Pain for Fem only lost 1 person. And actually not committing their Bloodlust. I lied.
You lied. And not for the first time, not for the last time either, as Meme Team gets everybody back up to snuff. Now, Heat, unfortunately, had some residual aggro, so needed to go die on the side. So make that 4 deaths right now for Meme Team. They don't have their Bloodlust available, so they're not... you know, they could do it as an aggressive as a pull. I mean, Pain for Fem is showing that it's doable without Bloodlust. It's just substantially more dangerous. So I'm not really sure what they're saving their Bloodlust for. I mean,
I remember they...
it's
pulling the Horrors on top of the last boss.
That's right, exactly. Yeah. So they grab the Gloom Horrors and run all the way to Gorak Tool with them, all 7 of them, and just cleave it down on top of the boss there. While likely Muo is going to jump on top of one of those little, I believe it's like a lantern or a candlestick, something like that, just to make sure that the Gloom Horrors don't jump, which of course puts a lot of pressure on the tank, as he does not have the relief of the Gloom Horrors traveling back and forth. But, I mean, it's something they practice, hopefully, so it should work out for them here as Lord Waycrest is reaching the final stage of his getting healed from Lady Waycrest, who of course will join the fight at 10%, as we know. Meme Team here only now has pulled the boss up. They've killed the majority of the trash, so a slower, but of course safer version of what Pain for Fem is doing.
Yeah, Shella had to refill his coffee there for a second. That's why he was standing in those swirlies. But now he's back. They are in the last phase. Lady Waycrest and Lord Waycrest that they have to deal with. We've seen lots of teams in the past just finish off Lord Waycrest and then deal with Lady. Some of them were trying to be as efficient as possible and cleave them both down at the same time. But sometimes it can go wrong and the tank goes down because they're alive for too long. So you probably just want to play it as safe as possible and make sure Lord Waycrest does go down first. Now, Pain for Fem, this is going to be the crucial point now, since they did save their Bloodlust for this very moment, and we're going to see all of those Gloom Horrors being pulled on the last boss. Now, thankfully, we don't have Necrotic anymore as the last time around, so there's no problems being caused by necrotic, but you still have 45, so they still do an insane amount of damage to the tank because they're obviously not jumping because of the Miwu being on the ledge. And I just said all of that for no reason because they're not actually pulling it on the boss.
Take that, Nagura. First you lie about the Bloodlust, then you lie about the Gloomhorse being pulled on top of the boss. I don't even know what to believe as a defensive Ring of Peace comes out of Miwu right there to make sure that he prevents the horse from jumping the first time. Now, on top of it, where did Fem go? He heroic leaped up. Oh, he heroic leaped up on the ledge, making the Gloomhorse follow him around right now, just to make sure they don't have that much crowd control in order to be able to provide, you know, sustained control on these horrors. You have a Shockwave, and of course you have the Ring of Peace, and that's it. Most teams run with a Resto Druid and a Windwalker here, so then on top of it you have a Typhoon and an Ursul's Vortex. So Fem played a bit defensively there by getting out, making them, essentially kiting them around a bit before coming back in. Gloomhorrors go down here, and I don't know if it's going to be enough percent as they hit. No, it is. Okay, so perfectly 100%, and they start to run into Gorak Tool's room right now. So I guess they're just saving their Bloodlust for
next dungeon.
A fortified boss here. Maybe next dungeon.
I think they want to do it, like they want to pull the horse on top, but because they knew. I think they just probably knew that they don't have to do it because maybe they saw the other team, but I mean, let's be honest, Meme Team not that far behind at all, so they actually do this pull that we've been talking about. Meme Team, they are pulling the horse on top. This is what they have to do to win this dungeon. They know, so they are pulling the Gloom horse. You can see the rest of the dude jumped on the ledge, so they will not be jumping around. They will only be hitting Herudra here. So I mean, it's still a 3 death difference. So even if Meme Team somehow would be able to finish the boss up faster and the trash faster, it's still 15 seconds in between, so it's too little too late for Meme Team. Unfortunately, they also don't have the Bloodlust available compared to Pain for Femme. But yeah, Pain for Femme, maybe this was closer than it had to be at the very last second here. Maybe they still should have just pulled those horrors on top of the last boss. If they saved the Bloodlust all the way for the last moment, then maybe they should have just done it.
I mean, to be honest, they're the team that I've talked to before asking them about Bloodlust, and they're like, oh yeah, we just forgot to use it. So I wouldn't be shocked if it happened to them again, as Gorak Tool hits 14% for Paid for Femme. Meme Team, I love to see that pull coming out of them. They knew where they were behind. Perhaps they did a pull that just wasn't comfortable to them. They didn't have Bloodlust ready for it, but they had to kind of do a Hail Mary and see if it worked out for them. But it did not, as Paint for Femme claims the second match and sweeps the series 2-0. Meme Team still has a dream though, Jag.
Woo. They do indeed. That dream will be in the lower bracket for them. Pain for Femme going to be moving on as they take that victory in Waycrest Manor. In very strong fashion. And again, this is a really well composed Pain for Femme team. This has been the good side we've always wanted to see. We've seen in limited dungeons here and there, but back-to-back games, they are showing really good performance.
Yeah, I'm really impressed with them in general right now, and it goes to show as well, because I think in the first half of the dungeon, they were actually slightly slower than Meme Team in general, but their strong play in the second half of the dungeon, good strategies, and just excellent use of the DK for damage on roll right here. They just did a lot of good things in the last half of the dungeon here, and their explosive management was great. Their death, they only had 1 death in the entire dungeon, and Waycrest Manor, a 22-minute dungeon, they were just, once again, this entire series, Paint for Femme has just been on point, and I feel like they're holding back. I feel like they could still go faster if they really wanted to as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. When we're on those 18s, I'm sure that there's a couple little differences here and there that they're going to be able to make and be able to pull out. But one of the most profound things is the snap spots that have continued to develop in Waycrest Manor. We had a couple ideas for them with like the Gloom Horrors, and Nagura mentioned on the last boss, to saying, all right, we're going to make sure none of these Gloom Horrors are going to jump onto people. But also, when we're getting ourselves set up for like the Rawls room, we saw a number of snap spots there that are helping a lot of these pulls just get a little bit more clean and getting everything stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, the snap spots have been really interesting in this dungeon, and I think we first saw them come out from Abracadabra. They used the benches and the chairs in the side rooms, especially in the hallways right next to Raw, in order to set up their pulls. And we'll see that in a second here. The Gloom Horrors are interesting as well, though. We'll get back to that in a second. But looking at the MPT, one of those snap spots we're talking about, and this is really interesting because they use rogues for this almost every single time, is there are benches all over the side of this hallway here. There's one there, there's one there. They're all over the place pretty much. And what you can do is you can have your rogue run off in any direction, and we see it specifically in this dungeon. The rogue will tricks, and he'll run into this room and into this hunter's lodge, and then he can go on and pull pretty much anything in this room. This is only about 8% trash, but it's all stacked up perfectly, and we can see just how easy it is to cleave this trash down, especially with explosive RNG. When the explosives are right on top of the pole, you can see Barry running down there. You saw the tricks icon over his head. The tank only has to stand here. All the mobs come to him. We saw this last year in Darkheart Thicket. We see it now in Waycrest Manor. These teams are just using these snap spots to perfection, and this is an awesome pull to see from Pain for Femme.
Yeah, it's also just going to be a lot more safe because we've seen a number of times with marksmen, if you're trying to be able to pull them more traditionally, you have to be line of sighting, you have to adjust everybody's positioning, and all those snap spots. I mean, it's interesting to see how far MDI has come from the days where you just get a blood DK, mass grip everything in, and just AoE it all down. But with Pain for Femme taking that win, they're going to be moving on into the upper bracket, and we are going to see Meme Team dropping down and awaiting the loser between our next matchup between 40K and Method NA onto this one. And Nagura, let's talk about 40K. Season 1. They looked like they were going to be a powerhouse. They were steadily progressing each week. They got better, but it seems like first couple weeks of the Cup in Season 2, they just kind of slept through it. They just kind of were too laid back for their own good, and they've opened up the possibility of losing their BlizzCon slot.
Yeah, so at the very start of the spring season, they didn't seem too great, but then they would steadily increase their performance over the spring season, and we thought that it would just continue for the summer season as well, and they would be the one to show up, and they would be the one to qualify for BlizzCon. But with their performance not being so great in the first and the second Cup, it's really on the line for them. So now they really have to show up. They're still the ones with the most points compared to, after Method EU and Method NA and Abra, of course. But they're there for the 4th spot. So if they show up this time around, they're going to make it and they're going to still get the spot. But they have to win and they have to get a decently high spot. Else it's going to be No Girls Allowed or Pain for Femme even who are going to take their spot.